And I'd like to now welcome Noel Pearson, our final speaker. Now, Noel comes from the Guugu Yimithirr community of Hope Vale, and I believe he is one of the country's great thinkers. I first met him 20 years ago in Cape York, and he taught me a lot at that time. He is notable for his vision. He was involved in negotiating the Native Title Act back in 1993 at the ripe age of 28. He's always been capable of seeing that a better way was possible and articulating it. He's also notable for his resilience. He carries a huge weight on his shoulders and has spent his life straddling two worlds. He's worked tirelessly in partnership with Conservatives over decades, focusing on the right of First Nations people to take responsibility. So tonight he will be giving us his perspective on the voice in terms of the specific provision. Thanks, Noel.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the welcome from the Noongar people, and I bring greetings from Cape York Peninsula. I'm so very pleased to be here with my old intern of 20 years ago, Kate. We were working on a program that we came to call Bush Owner Builder, helping families build their own homes on their homelands. Bob the Builder, we call it now. I'm very pleased to be here with Ken and Fred, my colleagues on the original 2011 expert panel established by Julia Gillard. Ken is singularly responsible for holding this idea of constitutional recognition over those long 9 years of Conservative rule. And there was every chance that we would lose the thread of continuity, but we didn't. We kept alive the agenda of constitutional recognition, and Ken was in the most excruciating position of all of us, having to maintain this opportunity from the hardest place possible. So I really appreciate that the opportunity that we're now 400 metres away from reaching. We're in this position because of Ken's work under the previous government. The only political thing that broke the bipartisanship, in my view, was the election of Labor. Essentially, what Linda Burney and Anthony Albanese have done is picked up a ball that Ken and others had nurtured over a long period of time. This should have been done by the Conservatives. It would have been easier on the country had it done so. The only sin committed by Labor was that they won power. And having waited so long for this moment to come, I obviously am delighted that we're now within reach of the goal that we've had really for 15 years. Okay, before I get to the details of the provision, I want to tell the larger story here. I think we're going to create a new story for Australia after October the 14th. The story that we've had from the beginning and that has prevailed for over 2 centuries is the story of settlers and natives. Settlers that believed this continent was legally unowned. That's the meaning of terra nullius. They understood there were people here, but the belief was that the people held no rights to the land. And the country clung to that settler idea for 204 years. It was not until our High Court had the opportunity to own up to the truth. The country was not terra nullius. The peoples in occupation of the country were human beings who had become British subjects upon annexation and were now entitled under the common law to their homelands. That was the truth. It was not just a truth of history, it was the truth of the common law. Inherited from England, according to the theory brought to Australia on the shoulders of the colonists, falling upon the land to become the law of Australia. So the big, great advance that was made in that relationship between the settlers and the natives was Mabo. But the story of settlers and natives is still our lingering story. The settlers are the main actors. They are the owners of Australia. And the natives are somehow out of sight, out of mind, on the margins of their own land. Not recognised. When the country was pulled together as a nation in 1901 with federation, there was no recognition of the natives. It is the lacuna that we're trying to fix with this referendum. To fix that which was omitted 120 years ago. And when we do that with this referendum, I think we'll have a new story. I think and I hope that the settler versus native story will fall away to history. We'll have a new story, and that new story will be about Australia's Indigenous story, going back 60 millennia, representing the foundations of our nation and encompassing all of the glorious languages and cultures and heritage of those 60 millennia. That'll be the first story. The second story will be the story that started in 1788. There's no denying it. The country has institutions that have their provenance in Britain, ultimately captured in our Constitution. Our British democratic heritage is the second story. And the third story is the story of our multicultural immigration and the triumph that we've achieved in this country of diversity in unity. We're a marvellous beacon to the world in what we've achieved with our multiculture. Those are the three stories of Australia. That is the Australia we see in the mirror, if we truly look. Settlers and natives is an old story. It ill suits our future and doesn't represent our present. We got 3 stories, plain as the nose on our face. Indigenous foundations, British democracy, and multicultural unity. When we look ourselves in each other's eyes, that's what we'll see in the future. We'll see a place. We don't even really know what to do with our multicultural groups that didn't come from the United Kingdom. Are they settlers? They're not natives. Or are we kind of giving them a kind of strange, undetermined position in our sense of who we are? We're going to clean that up. We're going to clear that up. And we're going to really understand there's 3 stories intertwined in Australia. And our children will ever look at themselves as part of those 3 stories. Not the way we look at ourselves or that we've looked at ourselves hitherto. And I think it will be a good day when our children see a new story about who the Australian people are and what is Australia. I have a belief that when we do that, we'll put behind us the prejudice, the rancour, the alienation between Indigenous people and the rest of the country. I think prejudice will diminish after this referendum. You know why? Because I think we'll let go of some of our hang-ups. Some basic hang-ups such as, if we recognise the Indigenous people, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to be required to jump on the ships and return to England? I think the problems are existential. They always have been. You study history. We couldn't recognise land rights because we couldn't work out how it is, if you recognise the land rights of the Aboriginal people in the 19th century, what does it mean for the rest of us? What is our footing in the country as settlers if we recognise the truth that English law accords possession to people who are in occupation? So we put off land rights for 204 years. Okay, I just have a great belief that when we understand that we're all Australians, nobody's going away, we're all here to stay, we all have a place in the country, we have done much justice with Mabo, and no one loses a backyard, not one. This is the provision we're voting on. It's got 4 parts, 92 words, and the first line is the most important: in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. This is what the Australian people will do in this referendum, which is as equivalent and profound as the High Court's decision in Mabo. The High Court has done its bit. Now the people of Australia, by authorising this referendum, will declare today and forever that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were the first peoples of Australia. The second part is the guarantee. The guarantee of the Australian people to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, not a parliamentary guarantee, not a government guarantee, but a guarantee of the Australian people that there shall be a body. Parliament can chop and change, can amend, scrap, but it always has to have a body. That's the guarantee. There shall be a body. The next aspect of the provision that we're voting on concerns the role of this body, the purpose. And the purpose is to make representations. Making representations, as Professor Toomey has explained from Sydney University, is Democracy 101. Everybody makes representations. Farmers, miners, human rights advocates, environmentalists, social welfare lobbies, individuals, even lobbyists. It helps if they got a donation in the bag. But they all make representations to the Parliament and to the government. It's just the normal democratic process. This voice will represent representations on behalf of two peoples, the Torres Strait Islanders and the Aboriginal people. And what on? Well, the words are very clear in that provision on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Their health, their welfare, their jobs, their culture, their land rights, their environmental concerns. On matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's the scope. You'd be hard-pressed to find nuclear submarines in there. or parking tickets. And I don't think if another siege happened in Martin Place that the voice would have to be consulted if it was an Aboriginal gunman, as Peter Credlin claimed. Okay, the final provision is the details. Where are the details? Who's hiding the details? Why aren't people being upfront about the details? It's all answered in the last clause. The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. That is the answer to the detail question. The Parliament shall have the power to make laws. About the composition, functions, powers and procedures of the voice. It's actually not the government. It's the Parliament that is responsible for the details. Linda Burney and Anthony Albanese may have a model in mind, but they've got to get it through the Senate. It's the Parliament that decides the detail. Mr. Dutton has a role in determining the detail, as does Senator Price, as does Senator Hanson. They're all responsible for furnishing the details through the normal parliamentary process. Now, this is the case with everything. That's how our democracy and Parliament works. The Constitution confers a power on the Parliament, and then it's up to the Parliament to furnish the details. Taxation, one word. 4,000 pages of legislation. The ABC, under section 51(5), first promulgated in 1932 by the Parliament, amended in 1942, scrapped in 1983, and completely replaced. That's the way our system works. Parliaments change laws, they change details from time to time. We are not voting on the details. The details are always subject to change by the Parliament. What we're voting on is the constitutional provision, and it's right there. So I urge all of you to take fellow Australians, family members, people at the train station, people on the phone. I want you to phone people. I want you to be at the railway station and the shopping centres. We've got to do this. We can't muck about. I want you to explain them this clause, these 92 words. We have got such a wonderful opportunity at hand here. We need Western Australia. We really do. You've got to treat this as 3.5, 4 weeks. It's the length of a normal federal election. We can win this. We need more volunteers. And we need you to take responsibility for the result. Only when all of us take responsibility for the result will we really shake this tree down. Thank you.